This is the entrance of large animal isolation. We do have a little table here that is set up basically to put your personal items on before you carry them into isolation. Once it goes through that door, it is considered contaminated. So what else we'll leave out here is medications, extra medications that we get out for a patient. So if something happens to that patient, we can still return them. So we'll just come out and grab what we need and then bring in as needed. Along with that, we have some extra personal kind of care if you want to wear a mask, if by chance that's your choice to go in. We also have masks with a screen kind of over your eyes to just be sure nothing can get in that way, and a lot of times those live up here also. So this area is also too where all of the staff comes into isolation. If we bring a client into isolation, we bring them through the outside entrance and have them go through the back of isolation to visit their animal. When they're visiting, they're only allowed to be there for about 20 minutes. They do have to be supervised by one of the staff members, and then we always assist them with gowning in and gowning out, and they are always required to gown in, gown out, no matter what their animal has. It's our policy, and there's no ways around that policy. As you prepare to go into isolation, you want to be sure you have all your medications ready that you're going to use, because once you go through here, you cannot come back out without being gowned up. The first thing I'm going to grab is I'm going to grab my boots. The boots are on the outside of isolation, so these are clean. These are brand new every time, so I can grab those and put them on. And I can put them on the outside because, again, they're clean, they're non-contaminated. You can walk into isolation. Go ahead and grab your clean gloves that are here available in case you need to change them when you will see when we are gowning in and gowning out. And then we'll prepare to put on our gown. So preparing to get into the gown is one of the hardest parts, along with ungowning properly. When you grab the gown, always grab it from the top, and then go ahead and pull it away. When you grab the gown, you want to check to see how the person before you used it hung that gown. It should be back to back. If I find the gown and the front of the gown is touching the back of the gown, I then have a contaminated gown. So at that point, instead of reusing that gown, I would throw that gown away and go ahead and get a brand new one. So once we get prepared to get into our gown, we're going to unzip the gown. So I have my gown ready to jump into it. I'm going to zip it as far down as I can to prepare for me to get into it. I'm going to touch it from the outside, keeping the inside. The inside should be the non-contaminated area of the gown. I'm going to jump into it. Avoid it touching my outside of my clothes as much as possible. Pull it up. And then now I'm going to cut my hands, go into the sleeves. Take the zippers, zip myself up. I'm going to pull my boots up so then they're nicely, everything's kind of arranged. I'm going to go ahead and do my medications, go into the stall, do what I need to do. When I'm all done and I'm ready to go out of isolation, one thing I want to be aware of is how clean are my gloves. When I'm done, what I'm going to do is, if my gloves are contaminated, I'm going to go ahead and change those gloves before I ungown. So what I'll do is I'll just take my gloves and I will cut my hands and put them inside out. Grab it from the inside too, do the same with this one, throw it away, and then I have clean gloves accessible from inside both areas of this. I'm going to grab those and I'm going to put on new gloves before I ungown. The main reason why is I'm going to have to put my hands through my sleeves to ungown, and I don't want to drag dirty, contaminated gloves with feces on them through the gown. So gloves are cheap, it's easy to change them. We'll just change them before we take off the gown. So this is the hardest part, isn't gowning and doing it the best that you can to minimize contamination. There is a red line right here. This red line is the part where you don't want to drag any more contamination out of the actual area of where the animal is. Past this red line is considered just as contaminated as inside of this stall. So that's why it's kind of a semi-clean area compared to the very contaminated area here. So once we bring something on this and even out of the stall, the only time that we take anything out of this stall is going to be basically blood work, and that is really about it. Any other things will be processed when the animal goes home, and it'll be sterilized in some way, either gas, steamed, thrown away, and it will go through the backside versus going out through the front. And that will something you guys won't have to deal with, but just so you know, when it comes in, nothing really has to come, you guys will never take anything out. So ungowning, I changed my gloves. My gloves are clean and I'm ready to ungown. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to unzip my gown, and then I'm going to cut my hands and just kind of help myself and just shimmy it off my shoulder. And then as my gloves are cupped, so the outside of the glove and the inside of the touching surface of my hand is actually cupped into my hand, I'm going to slip through my gown just like that. And then do this one too. And I'm going to shimmy it down again onto as far as I can, trying to keep the gown to try not to get contaminated onto the floor, but sometimes it is kind of hard. And then go ahead and shimmy it down more. And then this is why I always prefer putting the boots under my gown, is because I can grab the boot and my sleeve to my pant leg, and it assists with sliding off. Ideally then what I would do is I would put my foot into this foot bath, go ahead and throw my boot away, and I can put my foot on the cleaner side, and then this is the balancing act. If you guys are in the middle of gowning, your balance isn't as good. If by chance you need to put your hand on something, just be aware of what you contaminated, change your glove, and just clean thereafter. It's better that you don't fall over than if you do perfect isolation protocol. Don't fall into the foot bath. So when I'm done, next one, same way. Grab it and pull these up back. Put the gown kind of carried away from myself. Dip this foot too, come on the other side. And then now I have to find the top of my gown. See where I have it. Let's just touch the outside. Find the top of it. And then now I'm going to hang this gown back to back for this one was. So I'm going to put it there. And then so dirty side is touching dirty side. Last thing to do is to go ahead and get rid of my dirty gloves because they're the last contaminated things that I have on me. Throw those away. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wash my hands very well and before I exit isolation. And then once I'm in, I'm going to dip my feet on the way out and exit isolation fully. So this area here is where we have our medication supplies to grab needles, syringes, anything you need to do treatments in the actual isolation area before you go in. So that's where you grab those items. We do have a microwave and refrigerator down here too if needed to do hot packs, and you can ask the tech how to do that. There's a procedure for that. And also the refrigerator, of course, is for refrigerated medications for the animal that's in the stalls in isolation. So towards this way, as we go back, we have various supplies for just catheter supplies in here. We have nasogastric tubes, rectaling supplies, scrub supplies. There is really nothing that we can't bring down from upstairs, not small animal, and go ahead and we can clean them to bring them back upstairs. So we can bring down blankets, we can bring down the bear hugger, we can find a way to contaminate it. So there are most items that we can clean if we absolutely need to for a patient that needs them down in isolation. This room right here is our hay room that we have. We don't really bring down a lot of actual grain down here just because it isn't used on a regular basis. So the best thing to do is we just bring it down in small amounts in rectal sleeves for the patient as they need it and as they're using it and eating it. So that is that. As we go into the back of isolation where barn crew cleans and also where the clients come into isolation, we do have our little area where we keep the shavings. And then as we're in the back of isolation, to orientate yourselves where isolation actually is, the diagnostic lab is just to this area right here, and that's where we bring the actual animals in, and that's where the clients come in to visit their animals too. They just walk down the hill from the front office, and then we let them in and they gown in and gown out. The area back here is very similar to it is with the front stalls with the red lines. Once we go over these red lines, that's considered contaminated made, so if we need to go into the stall at all, we need to be fully gowned before we go over this red line right here. Cleaning the stalls will be all barn crew. You guys aren't going to be responsible for that, so that's something you guys don't have to worry about. Otherwise, you just ask one of the technicians or clinicians to help you out if you have a concern. So this is what we call a mini isolation in the hospital. What it is just a makeshift isolation in any area of the hospital if by chance we need to do that for maybe a neonate that needs a little bit more attention than having it all the way down in isolation, or an animal by chance that we just can't move due to its medical issues. So what we did is we just make a barrier in front. We have our gown the same as down in isolation. The gown in and out, gown out process is the same. We do not have a red line just because we kind of made it, but really the red line is at point of the foot bath here to where the gown still hangs in the same spot. We can change our gloves if we need to come out to be clean, but really in the process of gowning in, gowning out, the process of taking things in and out, the items that we use for the animal are exactly the same.